This is Dialogue. Dialogue, a presentation of the Public Affairs and Special Events Department of KLRB News.
Tonight, Dialogue Assassination with Mae Brussell. And sitting in for Gloria Barron, I'm Phil Kogan. Mae, on the first show that you did here, you discussed the motives for getting involved in this research. Okay, once you've decided that something has to be done, that this research has to be done, just how do you go about doing it?
Well, it's a big job. First, you have to have the feeling that something is wrong, like you say, you see it. And then you begin at we talked about collecting newspapers until the Warren Report came out, because the columnists were listing very main discrepancies in the physical evidence. And in September 1964, the Warren Report was published, and I bought it, and I began to read it. And I'll show you how I got into the Warren Report. But after I had been well into my research, in February 1968, the minutes of the Warren Commission some of them became declassified. We're talking about declassification in Washington now, national security. The working minutes of the meeting, the Warren Commission, some of them have been published. And there was a meeting of the commission members, April 30th. And they had a discussion on what to do with the material they had. They were going to put out a book which would be out in September. This is the end of April. They had May, June, July, and August, 4 months, and then the material would be bound and sold. And they had many, many problems they had never even scratched yet, and we'll go into those. But at the meeting of the Warren Commission, April 30th, Earl Warren, chairman, had to decide what to do. He said, naturally, we're going to publish a book. That was the intention, to get a book out and tell everybody what's going on. But what about the appendixes? What about all these reports, such as the FBI reports, State Department reports, and witness testimony? What do we do with all this? Are we obligated to give it out to the public? And one member of the commission said that if we didn't, that there would be feeling that there was a deep conspiracy. John J. McCloy, I'm reading from the minutes of the meeting now, said there would be a feeling, if we suppressed it, that the conspiracy was in the land. So the opinion was that we would take this material and publish it. Alan Dulles said the following. He said we would have 2 volumes, the report, meaning the Warren Report, and a volume of appendices, which ran into 26 volumes. We'll make this available so that nobody can say you have not tried to make the whole thing secret. And if historians later want to read it over and work on it, well and good. But I don't think anybody would pay any attention to it to begin with. Well, here I am, Mae Brussell, and I did pay attention to it. And that's how they were talking about me and us and people who care. They underrated the determination of a handful of people to take this material and see if what they published matched what they said. And I was well into my research when this was declassified, but that was the opinion of Alan Dulles, that nobody cares anyway. And in these times where you're talking about life and death and doomsday bombs and power structures, there have to be people who do care. It doesn't take very many, Phil, to change the course, but it takes a few. So Alan Dulles didn't know me, and I was around, and I was doing my work well into it by then.
So you actually started with the Warren Commission report.
Well, I started with the Warren Commission report, yes. Now, getting back before we opened the Warren Report, and I brought it with me today, I'd love to carry it around. At that same meeting on April 30th, the commission was meeting, and they had about 12 meetings that have been published now in one particular book. And Earl Warren says, I have a matter that I want to discuss with you, because there are rumors and articles such as Buchanan. That was Thomas Buchanan, who wrote the book, Who Killed Kennedy. Now, this is in April, and they're working on their report. He says Buchanan and Lane, meaning Mark Lane. He doesn't use his first name. He says Buchanan and Lane there's some things written that might be a good thing if we go into. He said, we will ask, this is Chairman Earl Warren, Chief Justice of the United States, we will ask the President of the Associated Press and the President of the United Press International and tell them that we would like to have them examine their reports and files on the assassination and confer with their people who are familiar with it, and then assign one of their top people who could come down here to see us and discuss on a confidential basis, not for publication, anything that may be on their minds to be investigated. So the news media, which was already controlled, was to send, you can imagine how objective a reporter would be going to Earl Warren if the president of the Associated Press sent him down there. Now, Earl Warren said this, I think by doing this, we'll establish to them that we investigated everything they have on their minds. Now, the problem was what was on Buchanan's mind? What was on Mark Lane's mind? What evidence did they have? They walked the streets. He walked the streets in Dallas. He met these people and talked with them, Mark Lane, all over the knoll and grassy knoll and everywhere. Why would the United Press satisfy what was on their mind? Now, this is the way problems are handled in the United States today. You have problems. You have real problems in this country. And we talked about father figures on the first show. Until you realize, and I'm going to read you what Louis Nizer wrote, a famous lawyer in the United States, one of the most famous lawyers. I'm going to read you his introduction to the Warren Report. And when you see these men who have written books, who are the figures that everybody looks up to, when you see in their own words how they work, you will understand why you have problems today. Well, the solution was, Earl Warren went on, if there are any areas unexplored, we will explore them. I mentioned before that Senator Cooper was conscientious. He let out a few little squeaks. He did bring up problems. So then he went on and brought up an area he thought should, this same meeting of April 30th. He said, I think that our investigation is weak. Now, they're 4 months from publishing. He said, what happened to this man, meaning Oswald, when he left the United States and went to Russia and came back? I think we ought to get him in the record and see what the State Department knows about him. What about de Mohrenschildt? Senator Cooper asked, meaning George de Mohrenschildt. Well, at that point, Earl Warren said, we'll go off the record. And the commission, the secretary stopped, and everything went off the record. Then the commission, Earl Warren, answered about George de Mohrenschildt and said, he has a full deposition. We'll go off the record. They discussed something. Chairman said, back on the record, and Mr. Rankin, the attorney, went on to the change of subject about declassifying some of the transcripts. Now, they went off the record about de Mohrenschildt, and Senator Cooper was asking a question. When the Warren Report was established, when the Warren Commission was appointed, in the beginning of the book, you will read a section that says that members of the commission should be present at the hearing of the witnesses. And I charted out which members of the commission attended any of the hearings of the witnesses, and there were only about 4 witnesses out of 552 that any member of the commission attended. George de Mohrenschildt was in Washington and gave his testimony 7 days before this meeting. His testimony is dated April 22nd, and this meeting was April 30th. And Earl Warren didn't say, oh, Mr. Jenner, de Mohrenschildt was here last week. Now, George de Mohrenschildt was the most important witness out of 552 witnesses called in Washington, and I'm going to tell you why. He gave the longest testimony of any witness in the Warren Report. He gave 119 pages. His wife gave 45 pages. It was the most important witness. And a member of the commission, had he been notified that de Mohrenschildt was there, wouldn't have asked, what about de Mohrenschildt? And he should have been there. Now, who was present when the most important witness of the Warren Report testified?